Hi, Dr. Audrey. How are you doing?
Hi, Stephen. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome, awesome. I am so glad that you're here and I'm honored. It's a pleasure to have you here. We have had a wonderful day today with lots of speakers and panelists and so forth, and we have been fortunate to have you here as well now. So I'm going to delve right into it, and I'm going to give a brief introduction to you, but I would want you to also share a little bit more about yourself. So, welcome, Dr. Audrey Tang. You are a sorry. Dr. Audrey is a chartered psychologist, and she's an award-winning business author with a focus on practical tools for well-being, amongst other things. She's also founded Wellbeing Media Studio and is a broadcaster as well. But I'm not doing justice to this, so I'm going to invite you, Dr. Audrey, to give a little bit more about yourself, your journey, and then we'll delve a little bit more into the details.
Great. Well, actually, probably the biggest achievement was I was a secondary school teacher. That's how I started, and that was tough. But that's how you cut your teeth, isn't it? So I taught psychology and drama, and then had the opportunity to do a PhD, which I did on the well-being of forward-facing professionals such as teachers, nurses, doctors, and so on. And my area was something called emotional labor, which is when, as a teacher, for example, you are expected to know your subject, know the skills of teaching, but also do it with a smile, or do it with caring, or do it with positivity, even if you've had a chair thrown at you, you've had a really bad day, and so on. But that emotional labor, that expectation of emotion and presentation, which may not sit authentically with what's really going on inside, can be a cause of burnout. And one of the key things that I found in my work was that actually it wasn't a case of teachers going, oh, I don't want to teach anymore because I dislike what's going on in the classroom. They knew it was challenging. We all knew it was challenging. And the chair thrown, I had that happen in my class, but I had a conversation with a student. We worked that out. We talked about it, and there were so many other things going on. And of course, you are able to manage those things. It's not that was causing the problem. It was the fact that management would not actually support nor understand the true depth of what was going on. And that was why a lot of teachers were feeling, well, very unsupported, very disgruntled, and wanting to leave the profession. That was in 2012.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, since then, I wrote my book on management, having worked within many higher, further, and educational establishments, secondary and primary. And following that, that was when I broke off into being a self-employed trainer and wrote my other books. And so I've now got the Head, Heart, Gut trilogy of leadership, which is looking at mindfulness, which is the head and the importance of clarity,
Mhm.
heart, which is well-being, and not only the well-being of yourself, but of your teams as well. Because as your previous speaker, Brandon, said, unless you've got a team around you, any changes you want to make, not going to happen.
Yeah.
And the gut is, of course, resilience, because when you have those ideas and you want to implement them and you've got the people to do it, you need the courage to go for it. So I kind of see that like the Lord of the Rings trilogy and The Hobbit, which is my first book, Be a Great Manager.
Fantastic. I
And
like
since
that.
then, I deliver training in the area of well-being. I broadcast in the area of mental health, and I do talks as well, internationally and nationally.
Amazing, amazing. And let's delve into this. And it's such an interesting path that you took and some of those pivotal moments as well. I'll say they're like breakthrough moments for you, even for yourself, right? But let's talk about the trilogy here, and one of them is around well around resilience and some of the tools that you've developed. Tell us a little bit more about that, but in the context of not only environments, businesses, schools, whatever it is, but also even from an individual perspective. Tell us how some of these practical tools are effective. How could people use that on a daily basis? And then let's talk about the other trilogy pieces as well.
Yeah, let's start with the whole point about resilience and what I found when I was writing the book. So we do need a tiny bit of theory to give it context. And
Mm,
that is, whenever I ask in training sessions, what is resilience? Everyone says it's bouncing back, bouncing back. That was the phrase we heard a lot after the pandemic as well. Bounce back. No one wants to bounce back. When you've had a bad time, you want to spring forward. You don't want to go back to where you started. And
mm,
so one of the key things to think about with resilience is it's about growth. It's about moving this way. It's, yes, you have to come back from a below point, but you don't want to stop where you got to. You actually want to grow. And what's so lovely about resilience research is that adversity, it's been shown that adversity creates the conditions in us to thrive, which wouldn't have been there ordinarily had everything been plain sailing. It's like the old adage, you never know how strong you are until you're tested. And that's actually quite true, because it's through that adversity that you suddenly realize, oh my goodness, I did have the capability, or I did have the learning, or I did have the people I could call on. One of the key things I would suggest, and this is probably a good place to start for people to realize, is they don't have to do everything themselves, but if they have built a good network,
mm.
that is one of the most helpful. And that network consists not of yes men and women, but people who have skills and things that they can bring to the table that are different to your own. On your own, you are only as good as your own brain. You do need that collective, but of course, be very careful with bringing in the right people, again, as your previous speaker said. The second thing I would probably say when it comes to resilience is we talk about adversity a little bit too much. We need to think about success as well. And the reason for this is, let's just throw this question out there. When you've had a success, how many people have actually learned from it? And I don't mean in a, oh, well, we can't be satisfied with success. We need to really pick apart what happened there. No, no, no. I actually mean, what have you learned from it? And ask yourself these questions. Of that success, how much of that was down to me or us,
Yeah.
and how much of that was down to luck? And
Mm,
the second question relating to that is, therefore, how much of that success can be replicated? Because too often we have a success and we go off thinking, yes, I'm brilliant, I'm fantastic. But actually, it might have been the conditions, it might have been the environment, it might have been luck, it might have been you were just in the right place at the right time, it might have been you were at that moment when everything was going to go your way. But if it's not replicable, then actually, how sustainable is that success? So that's the next thing to sort of probably consider. The third thing I would say is most important when it comes to building your resilience, and this is, I sort of had a little, adhered to it a little bit earlier when I said about your network, is being able to set boundaries.
mm,
And if you cannot set your boundaries, you cannot find the space to grow. And by setting boundaries, I don't mean be unfriendly or tell people to go away or anything like that. But the affirmation I give to people to kind of remind themselves is, I am a problem solver. I'm not the solution. You cannot be the solution for everybody. And you
mm.
actually cannot be the solution for your team all the time either, because if you do that, you're A, not concentrating on your own work, and B, all you're really teaching them is how to be dependent on you. You need to be there to empower them. And that's where things like asking coaching questions can come in. So one of the best boundary setting phrases that I would teach people is simply saying to your teams, how best can I help you? That
Mm,
might follow, what have you tried? And
mm.
what's going to work? But how best can I help you? That throws the power back to the other person. It allows them to think, well, actually, I need you to do this. And that also means that when you do jump in as leaders, as parents, as teachers, we all want to do, we all want to help. That way, if they can tell you what you need to do, your help is going to be far more effective. So
Mm.
those are probably the three best places to start from. Learn from success, set your boundaries, and be careful who you have in your network, and know that resilience is actually about moving forward
Yeah.
using the learning that you've had.
So I like all those three things, and I'm going to build on one of them, which is boundaries. And this is a common thing that's been thrown around. I've heard it more recently than more recently, about boundaries, and not boundaries in an organizational setting, because that's very, very important. You need to have those, as you mentioned, how you operate with your team, how you interact with your team, or even with your leaders as well, right? You need it's sideways down, down as well as upwards as well. Understood, because in an organizational context, boundaries, you could be in a way, you could be black and white there. What about when it comes to, let's say, relationships and personal relationships and so forth, and you mentioned the same way about not being angry, but rather, you're just, trying to problem solve, not giving all the time solutions and so forth. Um, what about in relationships? How does that work? And, it's coming back to that intersection with resilience as well. But yeah, go on. Let's hear.
Well, one of the first things, and there was this whole kind of TikTok storm that blew up over the word boundaries being used in a very inappropriate context to relate to control. Boundaries are things that you use for yourself. And it is about recognizing that not everybody would agree with them. And
Mm,
that's okay. And the only thing that you can do is decide how you want that relationship to progress, if indeed you do want it to progress, and you need to be prepared to walk away from it. You, that is, not telling the other person to change or to do anything like that, but
yeah,
you
yeah,
need to decide what is right for you.
yeah.
Rosalind Wiseman actually gives probably a very good example of this in something called the SEAL technique. The L of SEAL, and this is where it relates to boundaries, stands for locking in or locking out the relationship. If you have set those boundaries and people continually disrespect those boundaries, or perhaps you disrespect someone else's boundaries, then the decision is with the person who's holding those boundaries themselves to decide to lock in that relationship, which means make more adaptations and see how we can get it to work, or lock out and say, well, do you know what, I really can't compromise on that. That's one thing I'm not prepared to do. Both are okay, but it's not about controlling other people. This is all about your own self. So
Mm,
that's the key thing I would say about boundaries. um, and they vary from person to person,
mm,
because we all have something, and this is borrowing a term from trauma research, called the window of tolerance. We all have a certain amount of stimulation that we can have before it's too much, and so it's overstimulated, leading to burnout and so on, or too little, leading to apathy, depression, and sadness. And that tolerance, window of tolerance, can be very, very big if we have had generally a relatively stress-free upbringing or background leading to that point. It can be very, very small for other people. And you do not necessarily know where you're working with each person. And
mm,
so boundaries relate very much to that window of tolerance, but only you know where that is. In a longer term relationship, being able to explain that, being able to open up a little bit more and have that more comprehensive understanding of the complexities of the people that you're working with and of yourself can make a huge difference. But from a surface point of view, boundaries are for the person themselves who's setting them, and the choices are for that person to make. And secondly, we all have different levels of tolerance, so our boundaries will be very different, and we
yeah.
can be very understanding and learn and ask. It is all about communication.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I was just going to mention that it is about communication, and the important thing is just to understand how to communicate better, right? On all those on all those aspects. Okay, no, that's really great insight, Dr. Audrey. Tell us a little bit more about the mindfulness and leadership side of things as well. How does mindfulness contribute to enhancing those leadership qualities? What are
Mindfulness,
maybe, yeah, go
sorry,
on.
it just means taking a step back a lot of the time. I use mindfulness in common parlance. My grandfather was a Buddhist teacher. He used mindfulness in the Buddhism way, and that's great and that's wonderful. And it has a whole heritage. But in terms of practical mindfulness, it can be sometimes as simple as someone drawing your attention to something so you're more aware of it. It's
Mm,
about creating awareness, whether that's awareness of how your team are feeling. And it's a nicer way of just saying, read the room, please understand what's going on out there. But it can also create the clarity for you to make decisions. So it can help things like decision-making processes, problem solving. There has been research which has shown that mindful practice such as deep breathing, meditation, yoga, and so on. And there is the science behind why deep breathing slows our heart rate down and why it makes us feel better. But there has been research which shows that can also improve sleep, which improves relationships because you're less irritable. It improves concentration in meetings and so on. So mindfulness, in its ability to create a little bit of breathing space, especially in a very fast-paced world, comes into its own for the leader, because if you have got that space, you've got the space to create, you've got the space to problem solve, you've got the space to make decisions, and you've got the clarity to be able to think things through.
Yeah, no, amazing. Yeah, I mean, I sometimes find, and this is from a personal experience that I wanted to share with mindfulness. If people are not understanding when when you're in a particular topic and you're actually say we just need to be mindful about this particular situation and or this particular individual, and people don't really recognize that they're like in their own track, then that becomes very, very difficult, because you on one side, one part of the team is actually mindful, a couple of people are just not, so there's a bit of a misalignment there then immediately, and that causes tension and friction immediately. Yeah.
Again, to take it back a little bit from that, because a lot of the time when we talk about healthy relationships with people, you don't need to be best friends with everyone at work. In fact, I don't even think that's particularly healthy. What you do need to do is be able to get on with them enough to work. And that's where mindfulness can come into it, in understanding people's jobs. And that is as simple as that. So if, for example, you were able to get everybody together, this is where things like Kanban and other project management software and tools are really helpful. But if you can understand, if you're just, the example I use in my book is the manufacture of a pen. Somebody has to create the shaft, someone has to create the ink, somebody has to measure it, somebody has to sell it, market it, and so on. If you understand not only what the job entails, but when they need that information, because suppliers are calling, or journals are calling because they want you to market there in the adverts, and so on, we have a better understanding of why, when somebody says, I need it now, there is that desperation. And so sometimes it's not a case of understanding the person and being their best buddy. It is actually about understanding what their needs are and how you can accommodate to that.
Yeah, no, wonderful. Dr. Audrey, no, that's wonderful. Let's talk about some of the other elements of the trilogy that you had. One of them is around emotional fitness, a little bit more broader. You've developed workshop sessions, practices, all focused on mental and emotional fitness. Tell us, enlighten us on some of the strategies that you bring to the table here from a business, from a personal perspective.
Well, it all starts with Martin Seligman, who studied depression. So I learned about Martin Seligman in A-level psychology, when he was talking about learned helplessness in depression. He is actually now known more widely as the father of positive psychology, which is the science of happiness. And one of the key things that underpins all of my work is that Seligman said, I thought I could take depression and sadness and anger away from a patient, and I thought I would get a happy patient. I didn't. I got an empty one. And that is because the skills of flourishing are different to the skills of minimizing sadness. And therefore, when it comes to building our mental and emotional fitness, we need to consider it in 3 different ways. The first is, yes, minimizing the stress and those negative feelings at the point of crisis. Yes, absolutely. We need to be able to do that, because we can't move forward otherwise if we are unable to cope in that particular moment. But then we also need to work at building up our emotional fitness outside the point of crisis. You can't do it in crisis. We know that. How many times, if you've been stressed and someone says to you, oh, calm down, you actually get even more angry. So you can't do it in crisis. So the second set of exercises is all about outside the point of crisis. The third set is flourishing. The third set is about, okay, now we're good. We've minimized our cortisol. We're not affected by stress so much. Now we need to grow. So to give you a very quick whistle stop, one example of at the point of crisis, this might be, and the NHS loves this one, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. It is just simply looking around the room and saying out loud, 5 things I can see, 4 things I can hear, 3 things I can touch, 2 things I can smell, 1 thing I can taste. 5 senses, 5 different things. Don't get too caught up on whether it's 5 things to see or 5 things to hear. It really doesn't matter. The point behind that exercise, though, is that by focusing on the here and now, you get yourself out of your head. Because by getting yourself out of your head, and in the 21st century, our stress is actually self-propagated. Oh, why did they get that promotion? Oh, why didn't I do this? Oh, why did I do so badly? Why didn't I say that? We make it worse ourselves. We have to get out of our heads. So by looking around and physically saying, I can see the computer, I can see the blinds, I can see the whiteboard, we're actually now focusing on the present. And then the bonus point there is in the present, that's the only time we can actually do anything about anything. But that's also a really powerful technique to help somebody else through at the very early stages of a low level panic attack. You can sit with them and you can say, okay, look around. What are 5 things you can see? And you can hear it. If you can start by pacing yourself slowly, they will respond in that way. So that is at the point of crisis, one example. Second one, outside the point of crisis, Seligman would say, build up 5 key things, which is positive experiences. So that might be screenshot lovely things that people have said about you. We're so bad at taking compliments, but if we actually get one and we screenshot it, we can remember that we made a difference in someone's lives. That's really important. So positive experiences, engagement, loving what we do, finding meaning in what we do, really important. So be aware of when you are lost in time and know what you're doing when that happens, and try and find those moments if you can. It might not be in the workplace, it might be outside the workplace, but try and build 1 or 2 of those into your month, if not your day. That's engagements, PR, relationships, healthy relationships. So again, this is about making sure we are spending our time and energy with the people who build us up, who make us feel good, who energize us, not the emotional vampires who drain us. And my little tip there for getting rid of toxicity is actually to know who makes you feel great, actively choose to spend time with them, because it means that if you block that time in the calendar for them that you've actively gone out and sought, anyone else coming along, you can easily say to them, well, so sorry, I'm already too busy, I can't do it. It's legit, you don't have guilt, and you're already minimizing or putting a boundary on that time that you're spending with other people that maybe drain you a little bit more. PRM, meaning, and that is finding purpose and finding something that means something to you. Purpose is not the same as passion. Passion can subside and fade. Purpose is, what do I really want to achieve? And that might speak to things that one way of finding out your purpose is to think about things that you've done in the past, your past achievements, not what other people said was an achievement, but what you felt was the achievement. So for me, passing my driving test, of course, a great achievement. Everyone wants to be able to drive, but took me 4 attempts. And I eventually decided, can't even pass on manual, I'm going to pass on automatic. So I did. And whatever shame was involved in that, I just went with it and went, I can still drive. And I've never regretted that. But it's that knowing that, okay, if that's not going to work, I will find a way of doing it. That gives me meaning, that perseverance. That probably explains why I love teaching. And then finally, achievements. So even if it's something small. So this is where, if you're talking about somebody who's really having a bad time at the moment, just simply getting out of bed and having a shower, that might be the achievement. That is okay. You don't go and compare yourself to all of these people on LinkedIn, because we all know, and I apologize for this phrase, I'm going to use it. A friend of mine gave it to me and I love it. It's willy waving. We know it. We play the game. I've said it. And I don't care, because I know we have to play the game, but don't put yourself in that, not knowing it's a game and thinking it's all real, because it's not. So someone else's highlights reel. So that would be in the things that we can do outside the point of crisis to build our resilience. And then outside it is also looking at what we can do to thrive. And so the last thing I would say there is think about all of the different things that would make you feel fulfilled, and then work out on a scale of 1 to 10, how much am I really doing those things? And then if you can see things that are at 1 or 2, work out how you can notch them up to a 3. Because if you can do that, if you can see that, you have a very good blueprint as to why your life is feeling a bit off kilter, and then you can actually do something about it. Because if we're just doing it in our heads, it's not going to work. So a lot of my tools about getting that out of your heads.
Yeah. No, this is great insights, Dr. Audrey. And finally, we're just gonna conclude very shortly here, but I'm keen to just hear about community and well-being as well,
Yeah.
which is very critical. So in a couple of minutes, share with us your thoughts around well-being and that concept. How can individuals, entrepreneurs use that as a mechanism?
Our community is hugely important. And for example, you might have a community which feeds a university. And if there is that link between university and business, you don't necessarily get the brain drain. So those links are really key. And it's sometimes about looking at, well, what can I offer other people? And making those collaborations. Too often we think competitively rather than thinking collaboratively. But there is another side to community, and this comes under things like corporate social responsibility. And to take the psychological approach to it, simply seeing somebody do a good deed makes us feel good. It sends all those oxytocin hormones flying. And so watching someone do a good deed is great. Being part of doing that good deed is even better. And by being part of that, again, you meet like-minded people, you meet new people, you meet different people. That in itself can actually be very healthy, because again, you're getting new ideas from lots of different people. And then using the clarity from mindfulness, if we are only thinking, oh, this is what my community needs, we're only going to give that to them, you're going to push that on them. Whereas actually, if you're engaging and you're working with and you're understanding, you'll get a completely different perspective, and you might realize, oh, actually, this is what they really need. Which is why it is important, even on a smaller scale, if you're decision making, you need to go down onto the floor and do the work, because
Yeah.
you are making decisions that are going to affect other people, but not necessarily affect you. I used to do an exercise in training when I talked about budget. And the first half of the day would be about how we need to support each other and look after the team and so on. And then in the second half, I'd say, this is your scenario. You are actually the steering group. You are having to apply this. You're going to have to distribute the budget. You tell people you're going to either close down a hospital, or you're going to have to save some money somewhere and so on. And the dialogue from the same people who'd said, oh, you know, we don't feel supported, we don't feel as if anyone looks after, there's this thing they're going, oh, well, we can just shut that one down and we can move them from over there to move them. You know, these are people we're talking about, the very people that you were saying earlier that you felt were neglected. So it's about recognizing and keeping an open mind, and taking other people's perspectives. So that's probably the key thing there. I know there was a fifth point though, which is the controversial thing, and if we can get onto that, I would
Go for it.
really like
Go for
to.
it. Go for it. Go for it. Go for it.
um the
Tell
last thing I
us
just
about the
wanted to,
limits of well-being. Yes.
I know, the last thing I wanted to add though is this is the controversial bit. Your question was actually the limits of well-being. And one of the key limits that myself as a psychologist and many other consultants who go into the workplace will find is that often well-being is put onto the individual. It's, oh, everyone's burnt out, let's give them a well-being session. And yes, I'm not saying my tips and tools don't work, they do as individuals, but let me throw this at you. And this is the work of Karen Scholes I'm quoting and looking at here. Karen Scholes looks at something called psychosocial safety. And what this is taking a health and safety approach to the cause of the problem. And the best example I can give you here is, if I were to go into work and fall down a hole, health and safety would fix the hole. At no point would they say, well, it must be your fault. We're going to teach you how to walk around a hole, and then we're going to teach you how to get out of a hole. No, they fix the hole. So why is it when everybody is burnt out, the organization goes, well, we're not going to fix the system. No, it must be your fault. We need to teach you how not to be burnt out. We need to teach you how to deal with your own emotions and so on, rather than fixing the hole, fixing the system that caused the burnout in the first place.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, no, that's true. Absolutely. And it comes down to how you operate as an individual as well. So that's an important aspect. Dr. Audrey, is there anything that you want to share with the audience as a challenge back to everyone? Because you've shared quite a few strategies, but share a challenge or two with the audience.
Oh, okay, my challenge would be, and this was given to me by a fabulous coach called Sharon Lawson. This is the Spices Challenge. It's a self-care challenge. Every day, I want you to pick one of the following. It makes up the acronym SPICES for your self-care. Spiritual, which might be things like meditation; physical, running or dancing or whatever; intellectual. Now, this is a big one, such as learning something new, watching a documentary, feeding the mind; creative, which it is not just writing poetry or songs, it can be just getting creative with what you wear and so on. Emotional, which might be finding that one person who you can speak to and connect with; and social, going out into the community. We tend to, when it comes to self-care, only do the things that we are used to and the things that we like. But the problem happens when if we're not able to do those particular things. So if we always run for our self-care, but then we have an injury or it's
Yeah.
raining or something like that, we need to find other things. And so that challenge explores the many different things we can do for self-care. Some are relaxing, some are re-energizing. They give you different things and give you different senses and feelings that you can actually get when you try any of them. But the main thing to remember as well is give all of them a go, because you might stumble upon something that you like. And if you don't, it's okay, because we're all adults and we can not do those things if we don't like them. So
Yeah.
it's about taking ownership, practicing, thinking wisely, and making your choices.
Yeah, no, I love it, and big proponent of self-care. So I fully am on board with that. Dr. Audrey, thank you so much for being with us today. It's been a pleasure. You gave us some really great insights and practical strategies as well. And in terms of audience engagement, how would you like the audience to engage with you?
You can get hold of me via my website, which is www.draudreyt.com, or you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, all the socials, X rather than Twitter, sorry, at Dr. Audrey T.
No, wonderful. Okay. Dr. Audrey, thank you so much. You have a wonderful rest of the day and evening, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you, you too. Take care.
Wonderful.
Bye.
Okay, so wonderful. Thank you so much for listening in to Dr. Audrey Tang. Our next guest is Manoj Agarwal. Unfortunately, Manoj was not able to make it, so we did have a pre-recording session just last night, and I'm going to play that here for the next 20 minutes. But we had a very interesting discussion, and he's going to share a lot about AI. So bear with me as I bring in Manoj and his recording. So I'm going to stop recording here for a minute.